Even though everybody has experiences with receiving bad feedback, and it's intimidating to give feedback, feedback is important for helping each person thrive and excel. Good feedback is going to set up a culture of continuous learning, whereas bad feedback can drive people away physically, mentally, and emotionally. We're going to talk about the science behind that in this video. We'll also learn why effective feedback is frequent, timely, specific, focused, positive, actionable, and framed as an observation. Finally, I'll suggest some ways where you can get comfortable with giving and receiving feedback. Providing and receiving the right kind of feedback, do this, move here, not like that, like this, is profoundly important for honing our skills and reaching a deeper level of expertise. But as Seth Godin said, I'm not sure what takes more guts, giving it or receiving it. Studies show an increase in heart rate and other stress symptoms for both individuals who are involved with feedback, the one giving and the one receiving. Additionally, studies of brain activity have been done using fMRI, and this tracks the brain activity by monitoring blood flow to deliver glucose and oxygen with increased neuronal drive. And when you look at the brain scans of people who are receiving criticism or other social threats, it looks just like the brain scans of somebody who's experiencing physical threats. The same areas of the brain are activated. This is the limbic system, which is your emotional and your fear center, and your sympathetic nervous system. And this is what activates our body changes. Our hearts race, becomes hard to think, our faces flush up. Therefore, criticism is often counterproductive because it's a social threat. Criticism can make the person feel excluded, or like they're in a lower or more vulnerable position than the person who's giving the criticism. Additionally, it makes it feel like credibility is being questioned. Social threats also create what's called cognitive dissonance. And this is when our fight or flight reactions are activated, how our brain tries to mentally flee that idea. So what it does is it rejects information that doesn't agree with our sense of self in a way of self-preservation. And the Oatmeal comic does a great job of explaining cognitive dissonance. So to prevent future hurt, people learn to rationalize or temper their reactions. They suck it up. But what they might also do is distance themselves by limiting their commitment and their engagement. So criticisms that aren't actionable, such as "that didn't work," are harmful. And constructive criticism needs to be framed in such a way that sidesteps the social threat response. One way to do this is to make feedback short and instructive. Student predictors of coachability are knowledge and attitude. Make sure you understand what your student knows before you provide feedback. Can they grasp what you're saying? Are you talking down to them? What is the student's framework? Do they have knowledge in another field you might be able to draw on? This could be other martial arts, color guard, dance, music. Feedback is about guiding what they are already able to do to help them get closer to their goals. Do they have a foundation in period fighting techniques or body mechanics? If not, prioritize and structure your feedback accordingly. Find the feedback that they can use right now to meet their greatest need, and encourage and help them with instruction for helping build that foundation in the future. And can they absorb the information the way you've presented it? So see my video on sensory modalities for more information about how you can vary the way you present the information to improve retention. Attitude can make somebody receptive and resilient to criticism, or give up. So let's talk about growth versus fixed mentalities. Fixed-minded individuals tend to think of talent as being innate. They attribute failure to a lack of ability and adopt performance goals in order to outperform other people. These people need to be the best, or they're going to give up. They can be incredibly driven, but kind of fragile. Growth-minded individuals, on the other hand, tend to think of talent as being earned through practice. They can be hard to motivate sometimes since they don't necessarily identify as having talent, but they improve more from failure because they see it as an opportunity to grow. And you can take a test to see which one you are. And there's been studies with people who have these different attitudes and how they respond when they make a mistake. And in this study, they used EEG, or electroencephalograms. And this is where you have electrodes on the scalp, and they measure the neuronal activity that creates voltage changes that are detectable when you've got thousands or millions of neurons firing in synchrony to process information. And in this task, they measured EEG during a simple, boring, repetitive task. And what they found when somebody made a mistake was two error-related potentials. The oh crap signal is first. This is the error-related negativity, or where the neuron activity decreases. This is located in your anterior cingulate cortex, and this is the unconscious error detection process and error correction process. The error-related positivity follows shortly thereafter, and this is more broadly localized. It's positively, which means an increase in your activity, and it's localized to the anterior cingulate cortex again, the anterior insular cortex, as well as the parietal cortex. So these are a lot of information association areas, as well as part of your sense of self. And this has been attributed to paying conscious attention after a mistake has been made and allocating attention towards error correction. And what they found was that people who associate with the growth mindset have a higher degree of event-related positivity and a higher degree of accuracy after making this mistake. It turns out growth versus fixed attitude is malleable. In a study done by psychologist Carol Dweck, kids started out with a fairly easy puzzle. Afterwards, the researcher informed them of the results and gave a 6-sentence phrase of praise. Half the kids were praised for their intelligence. You must be really smart at this. The other half were praised for their efforts. You must have worked really hard. The kids were tested a second time, but this time they were offered a choice between a harder test or an easier test. 90% of the kids who were praised for their efforts chose the harder test, whereas the majority of the children who were praised for their intelligence chose the easier test. Finally, they took a test that was similar in difficulty to the first one. The kids who were praised for their efforts improved their scores over 30%, whereas the kids who were praised for their intelligence decreased their scores by nearly 20%. And Dweck was so surprised by these results that she repeated the study 5 times, and each time the results were the same. So think about how you approach feedback. Your training and your growth is going to benefit from making mistakes and being challenged. And when you're giving feedback, focus on their efforts, the techniques learned, not some innate ability or their character. And remember that the temptation to praise can have unexpected consequences. So focus on actionable feedback. Replace "good job" or "you're a great fighter" with something repeatable in the future. Good intensity. You did a great job waiting for the right opportunity. Nice job defending those first 3 attacks, against those first 3 attacks. Attitude is also fluid. There's going to be some times where somebody is going to be more receptive than others. The middle of a tournament might be a really bad time to start giving some criticism. Or they might be having an off night and every piece of feedback just feels like criticism. The best way to figure out if it's a good time? Ask. Finally, it's hard to coach somebody towards goals that are not their own. Encourage goal setting and use those goals to help provide feedback for that person. So why is it that a lot of feedback doesn't actually help the person improve? This is because we tend to assume that the expertise of others is lacking and our natural inclination to insert ourselves into the feedback. So the first fallacy is that we think that the person doesn't know what they're doing is right or wrong. However, keep in mind that right or wrong, good or bad, is subjective. It's based on our own inherent biases, which can be everything from body type to what system we prefer. Number two, keep in mind we tend to think that if there's certain abilities you don't possess, that it's up to your colleague to provide. However, learning is more about strengthening associations that already exist. So for a discussion of this, refer to my overview video. So when you go into feedback, don't assume that presenting information automatically means that they're going to be able to use it the same way. It has to tie into their existing framework. And to do this, it's going to require two-way communication. The third fallacy is that we tend to think that great performance is going to be universal, analyzable, describable, and once you've described it, you can transfer it from one person to another, regardless of who they are. However, excellence is unique. What works well for one person doesn't automatically work for somebody else. So for example, Agrippa had excellent math skills. Capoferro was likely a tall, skinny guy with long reach. Fabrice was a short guy, he loved his momentum. And Tybalt had the opportunity to travel and learn from a lot of different systems and put it together into something that was a lot more easy to approach. And they're all excellent systems, but they're all using very different skill sets. And so be really wary of the one body type or the one mentality type fits all approach, because it sure wasn't that way in period. So to give feedback, first separate yourself from the person you're giving feedback to. Describe what you experienced in that moment. This is what I saw when you did X. Or do you see what happened there? This is my perspective. These are your reactions. They are your truth. You're not judging, you're not fixing. The flip side is you can try exclusively showing it from your perspective. So this is how I handle this situation. This is how I do it. And then you let them use their expertise to fit it into their framework and make it work for them. And if you want to know their perspective, ask what they're struggling with. Why do you think it's not working out? What have you done in the past that has really helped you out? So the good thing about feedback is you don't always have to start with extensive instruction. A study from Laura Schultz at MIT gave 4-year-olds a new toy with 4 tubes where each one did something different. And for the first group, they presented the toy like they had accidentally discovered it. Look what I found! And then accidentally pulled the tube and it gave a squeak and acted surprised. Like, oh my gosh, what was that? Let's see if we can do it again. The second group of children were presented the toy with a more typical instruction. So here's the toy. If you pull on the tube, it makes this squeak. And both groups of children were given the toy and the opportunity to play with it. And both groups of children pulled on that first tube, they made the squeak, they laughed, and then something really interesting happened. That second group that got the instruction got bored with the toy and never discovered all of the things it was able to do. Whereas that first group stayed curious, pulled on all of the different tubes, and explored all sorts of hidden surprises. And so the thing to remember is, when students are given explicit instructions and a very narrow focused amount of information and directives of what they're supposed to do with it, they're going to become less likely to explore on their own. And curiosity is a great skill for staying motivated and going deeper and inspired to learn. This also yields new ways of looking at a technique. Because let's be honest, no perfect interpretation of any of these systems exists. We're constantly getting new insights. So I like to give short instructions, 1 to 3 things, just taking a few minutes, and then give them a chance to play with it, see how it works, and give feedback in the moment. Then give them the next set of instructions after they've become comfortable with those first few items. To recap some of what we discussed, feedback has the best potential to be effective when there is two-way communication, when it is frequent, timely, so when the memory is still fresh, but waiting if there's a lot of emotions at the moment. Feedback that is specific, actionable. Feedback that's given in private in some occasions to sidestep the social threat response. Feedback where you give it in terms of I, because this is your take on it. Feedback that is focused, 1 to 2 items tops, and integrated with positive encouragement, particularly about effort and improvements that have been made. So how can you start doing this? If you want to improve feedback culture at your practice, start small. You can model giving feedback, asking for feedback, talking about feedback, and providing specific opportunities for practicing it. A good place to start is in the flow. While you're sparring and you see something that's been done well, say, yes, do that. Number 2, use a wouldn't. So this is where you model the right way of doing something, then you show the incorrect way that you had observed taking place, and then remodel it with the correct way of doing it. So this demonstration should be very brief, 3 seconds-ish or so, but you clearly show what you do, the context of where they were, and then redirect back to what they ought to be doing. Number 3, feedback should be normalized and practiced. One drill I like is where one person does a pass with everybody in the group, and this could be with or without an objective. And then everybody will circle up and give feedback, and you repeat this with everybody. And the benefits of this is that everybody's learning from the feedback that's being given to other people, and they're also getting a chance to practice giving feedback in an environment of their peers. A 4th way is rapid feedback as a group, using I like, I wish, or what if as a discussion frame. So after a class, practice, series of passes, circle up and say, what went well, what could have been better, and ideas for next time. A 5th thing you can do is ask for explicit feedback. Say, hey, I'm working on X. Do you have any specific feedback for how I should be practicing it? Or how I might implement it in this particular situation? Or, did you see me doing it correctly in the passes we just did? Another very different attack, but still asking for explicit feedback might be, I don't know what I should be working on, but this is what I'm having problems with. And the 6th thing to keep in mind for implementing feedback is it takes time to build a rapport through positive, supportive instruction. And you should also be contributing towards a supportive environment. So don't give in to the temptation to rush ahead to being guru on the mountain or just delivering blunt critique all of the time. Work up to giving feedback in a constructive set way. And if you have criticism, build up to it in a session. Don't immediately go into there. Use the responses to gauge how you're going to continue. So in summary, feedback is scary to give and receive, but good communication makes this easier. Don't make assumptions about the knowledge of the person who you're giving feedback to, and keep in mind that a growth mindset improves learning from mistakes and growing in skill. Keep curiosity in balance with feedback, and make your feedback frequent, timely, specific, focused, integrated with the positive, and actionable. So start trying out ways to give, solicit, and share feedback with your groups. Good luck, and thanks for watching.